Today we have the pleasure of receiving today's lecture on fire safety on construction sites from Fabian Murphy. Fabian Murphy is a Chartered Fellow of IOSH. He is one of the first students in UCC to receive a diploma in occupational safety and health, 1991 to 1993, and is a risk management surveyor with Aviva Insurance for over 20 years. He is currently Vice Chair of Ireland South Branch of IOSH and been an active member in IOSH for over 27 years. Fabian holds a diploma in fire engineering. His role involves surveying construction sites and providing advice for insurance brokers and client construction companies. So thank you very much for that.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Fabian, and I work with Aviva, and I go out to sites, things like that. So this evening, I'm going to talk about fire prevention on construction sites. Is that different from fire safety? Maybe a little bit. So the objectives I'm going to talk about the joint code of practice. So this was an arrangement between insurers and construction sites with the regulators in the UK, so that we could manage large risks together, things like that. So it's a joint arrangement in that the construction companies have got complex problems, and the insurers don't want to pay for big losses. So it's trying to set kind of a footprint or a floor under which we could kind of all work together. So an awful lot of the companies in Ireland might be familiar with the joint code of practice. There's our European standards. I'll show you those at the end. And they're all very, very similar as templates and things like that. But it's all looking at fire prevention. Life safety really should be, is all part of the occupational safety part of it. It's integrating. You can't eliminate one without the other. Things like that. So if you eliminate a fire risk for people, it'll actually help the construction site as well from the project and risks, reducing the risks. So it's basically about kind of designing out the risks of fire, taking simple precautions, adopting safe working practices, and all parties to work together. So that's the objectives and things like that. We're looking at kind of weekly checks, weekly inspections, and ensure there's a safety plan. Just a second, moving on. Let's see if I can do this right. Okay. Straight away, I'm jumping now to section 5 of the joint code of practice. The first 4 are really just kind of objectives and compliance and dealing with definitions and things like that. So it's kind of the irrelevant stuff. So really, you're starting straight away into the meat of the code of practice. The first part, we're looking at the requirement to work with project supervisors for the design stage and the construction stage, having a coordinator there. Look at the original plans and making sure that you design out the problems. You're going to be doing that on construction sites. You're going to be looking at scheduling, and you're looking at lifts, and you're looking at bringing in machinery or something like that as a site is going on. So really, it's important to get in early, try and eliminate the use of combustible materials. So basically, at the start, use non-combustible, non-flammable materials. So trying to use rock wool or other materials or something like that instead of maybe polystyrene, or reducing your overall combustible levels. Making sure that they're maybe manufactured elsewhere or something like that, rather than doing hot works on site. You can maybe prefabricate some of these things off-site. So that would all help in your scheduling. So the materials and methods to avoid hot work. So if you don't have hot work, you've got less things to start the fire. And how to prevent the spread of smoke and fire. Smoke can also contaminate. It's not just a life safety issue that you won't be able to run around trying to breathe smoke, but the smoke will leave lots of particulates and contaminate huge surfaces, things like that. Nobody's going to sleep in the bedroom of a hotel where there's the smell of smoke. It's just, that just doesn't work. So that's why just control the smoke will help reduce the spread of fire. And of course, having safe evacuation routes, getting people off site, that's a primary one, really. So maybe if you're up on a scaffold, is it only one access point or two access points? So the code of practice actually looks at the regulations and say you should have two access points, so that if there's a fire starting where you are, that you've got a second route to get out. Early use of firefighting and fire alarm systems is important. So it's the first principles really of firefighting. If you've nothing to burn, get at it early, then it's making it an awful lot much easier. Section 6, the construction phase. We're looking here at getting a good plan, and I can't emphasize enough, a good plan works with a drawing, and laying out where on the site your skips are located, where's the access routes for a fire brigade, where are cars parked, where's your set down, where is your lifts and things like that. How frequent are where are the fire hydrants? Are you going to park over there, or are the fire hydrants going to be last or they first? And groundworks, and maybe you don't have water yet, so it might be looking at, well, we need a couple of tankers, just a tanker of water. During the summer, we probably need a tanker of water anyway to dust down and to keep the dust down, but keep it full in the evening time in case there's a fire. You'll always have access maybe to water during the early phases, but just having a tank of water would help. You might have a fire water tank, but you can get a fire water bladder. That can be, you could have hydrant points there. It'll still hold maybe 50,000 litres of water, and it would help, especially if you have that conversation with the local fire officer. Do they have to bring a fire tender, or do they have to a water tank, and where's their nearest resources and things like that. Trying to close the door. And there's a bit of noise outside. So you're looking really at kind of fire detection systems, location of smoking areas, or the location of no smoking areas. That would also kind of make sure that people are not smoking. Location of construction and temporary buildings. So your site offices, where are they located? Are they going to be right next to your new building, your new school, your new hospital? Are there's going to be a little bit of distance, but are they going to be in the basement car park while you're building overhead? So these are all challenges. So then you're looking at drying rooms, you're looking at hot works, and where all, is there anybody able to bring their tools in their van? Okay, bring them in, drop them, get the van out here. Because during COVID was a good example of people not having a canteen. They were safer in their own little working pod, and they were eating in their own car. So then you'd have the engine running. It gets cold, and people would be, they might be heating stuff up. So there's lots of things that you'd have to look at. Brigade access, instructions to site personnel in the event of a fire. The instructions, of course, should be in what language? None. Pictures, pictograms, angle, just European running man. You've got it here at the back of the room, and things like that. So, making sure that people can read it. Like you could have, basement level 1. There's a big, huge word there for somebody who's maybe Polish and doesn't have that English as their first language. So then, how else could you draw a basement level 1? So it'd be a line and -1, and showing what ground is and how far you're up above. Because once you start to go multi-stories, they all look the same. Are you on floor 1? Are you on corridor B or something like that? So having all these kind of a good practice guides. So really talk about with your safety officer to look at kind of the best pictograms that you could use. Security measures are important to minimize arson. Yeah, that's your biggest sometimes your biggest losses and things like that, material storage and waste regime, having all that in the plan. But really, it starts off with a big drawing of the site, where you can park, where you don't park, things like that. And that's what construction people work off of. They work off of plans, they know locations, and they're very good at orientating a drawing around as to what they're seeing. So you don't need an awful lot of language. It doesn't need 14 pages, just one big drawing, you know. Select a fire safety coordinator. That's really, you have a safety officer on site, hopefully. But does the safety officer have that skill set in doing hot works and management by walking about? But actually having a person responsible for safety, for fire, might be what the site needs. No. So coordinating with them, there's the joint code of practice, actually, it's now at revision 10, but revision 9 had a check sheet. Not an awful lot has changed, but the check sheet is a fantastic document to break down the day-to-day routines of going around the site, checking your fire extinguishers, you know, are they serviced, checking fuel, where is it located, things like that, you know. But mostly it's hot works, you know. You don't have to be a genius. Follow the hot works. That's where the majority of fires actually start. And probably you know, can we all think of really big fires in the last 10, 15 years? The ones that made the newspapers. Or you know, so Windsor Castle. That was a construction work, you know, and they were doing renovations. And Beirut was a hot work permit issue that had massive consequences and things like that. So there's lots of things that you have to kind of look out for. Just follow, where you know you don't have to be a genius really. But look at maintaining the site and having written records, you know, do patrols, you know, and smell. You know, if you can smell smoke, that is fire. So it's just trying to, don't call it a smouldering, you know, follow it down, things like that. But even things like housekeeping. If you've nothing to burn, like you've swept it all up, and an awful lot of places will do lots of sweeping, but not actually emptying the bins. So if I'm going out to a site, there's nothing like kind of doing a full tour of the site and counting how many cigarette butts have you found. You know, they might be old ones, they might be new ones or something like that, but it's just evidence that somebody has been smoking. You know, so you just have to kind of control, observe, talk. But if people are going to be smoking, at least, you know, sweep it up and don't give me the evidence. You know, you're not controlling it. But people, they're not thinking, you know. But what I'm saying is, get the safety person or the fire person to actually walk the site. Be a coordinator. Section 7 is dealing with the fire brigade. Now, in the UK, they have an awful lot more full-time stations and things like that. In Ireland, you have 222 fire stations around the country, and fire is quite common, you know. So the majority of responses from a fire brigade, now it's beginning to becoming more car fires or car collisions and things like that. But still, a half of their work, their day-to-day work, is actually dealing with fires. You know, so that's actually quite common, and it's popular to the chemists and things like that. Everything will go from, you know, from carbon to carbon dioxide. So just you're always running against the hill. So really, so talk over with the fire brigade, invite them to a site if you can, especially if it's a prestigious site, maybe like a new hospital. That would have implications for the nation if there was a fire on a new hospital and we're all dependent on it. Or it could be a pharmaceutical plant that might be making lots of money for the country, or might be making vaccines for the world. You know, these are all critical infrastructure. So it's important to have the local chief fire officer coming out. Retained fire stations actually have to do weekly, maybe bi-weekly training sessions. So bring them to the site. get them to see, well, where's their nearest water, you know, or, you know, if they had to do a rescue, things like that, you know. So the local crews need training, invite them to the site, get them to look at what are the issues that they would have. But we're here in Rochestown Park. Our nearest fire station is in Anglesey Street in Cork. And there's a number of different routes of how do you get here, things like that. So I did this in a particular morning. It's probably, and of course, this is not looking at when the traffic is worst or anything like that. So probably look at Google. And I just screenshotted the Google, things like that. And here we're looking at the longest journey actually was the fastest, or thereabouts. So the shortest journey, which was 4.3 kilometers, was taking about 7 minutes. What I would have driven is about the same time, as far as I know, it's still about the 7 minutes. So what are you looking at? That would be the route that I would take, but there could be other congestions along the way if there's an event. So you might need to look at other resources that might need to come to the site. So you go to your next nearest fire station. So your next nearest fire station is up on the north side, on the ring road. And they can actually go out via the tunnel, or again, right through the city centre. That's 7 kilometers, 7.3 kilometers, and about 15 minutes, or can go 13 kilometers out around the tunnel, and that'll take 15 minutes. Is that the same? Is that so? That's the nearest fire station, but is that the fastest one? Because there's another fire station for Cork here, which is Ballincollig, now full time. So it's nearly 13 kilometers, but you can do that in 12 minutes. So there's lots of things that you need to kind of look at, because you might be on a site where you might need a hydraulic platform. But is that hydraulic platform based in Middleton or based in the city? You know, I don't expect that there's going to be huge construction sites here in the hotel, but there's going to be other projects around. So you have to look at, well, what are your issues, and having that simple conversation. You know, when you request a fire brigade, have you got an air code? Most houses that are, let's say, a housing estate that you're building or a new building, probably won't have an air code just yet, because that's the last thing. That's probably won't have water just yet. So there are lots of things. What won't it have? Probably won't have roads just yet, you know. So these are all going to be challenges for emergency services. Now, I'm only just looking at the fire brigade, but you might be looking at, there might be other services that you might need. There could be the ambulance, you know. So these are all, you have to integrate them all there. So go on to Google, literally do it and put that in your fire plan, and that you've looked at it at the worst times, things like that. So then you'll realize really it's taking 15 minutes for a brigade to get here before they start to walk the site. So you'll be off, you'll have a good emergency evacuation, you'll be down off the site in, let's say, 3 or 4 minutes, and the place will be burning for 10. So is that too long? Yes. So there's lots of ways that you can actually do to try and minimize your fire stopping along the way. And we'll discuss that then further in the presentation. So we're talking about kind of emergency procedures, and it literally, this is all life safety, you know. And there's nothing like following the next of kin list and the mobile phone, and that's not a conversation that any engineer or any safety officer wants to have on a site. So establish a means of giving a fire warning. So the regulations, the code of practice actually looks at the regulations and says, yeah, this is good practice, you should be doing it. So life safety is a critical element, things like that. And what we're looking at is, you know, put up temporary systems. You can have emergency call points located throughout the site if it's big and wide and things like that. It all depends on what, are you renovating a building that might have polystyrene in it? Or are you building a building with polystyrene? You know, or what are you looking at? You know, Display written emergency procedures, have clear access, and an awful lot of sites, of course, have site induction. But make sure they actually cover that. You know, where did you park? Where did you don't park? You know, can it be easily understood by somebody that doesn't have English as their first language? Did you not know that I'm illiterate without my glasses? You know, so, and there's lots of challenges that we all have, you know, so it just has to be clear and quick and things like that. Clear signs, you know, and knowing, let's say, where your dry risers are, where maybe you might have a wet riser, where your extinguishers. Walk from your site tomorrow morning, go out into the middle, stand, look around. Can you see a fire extinguisher? If you can't, well then maybe you don't have enough of them, you know. And now you might be finishing a project and you've taken away your construction ones, but you haven't yet installed the customer's ones. So then you've got a huge vulnerability. And so so don't replace one unless you can replace one with one. Do you know what I mean? So things like that, you know. And of course, what I'm saying down below, must consider non-English speaking workers and things like that. So try and eliminate all instructions in written words and use pictograms. Fire protection. So what we're looking at, we want early installation of fire stopping, of passive fire protection measures. The door that you came through, that's a passive fire measure. Close it after. Now, you're going to be bringing out material, so you're going to keep the door open, possibly, but then at night time. So for 16 hours of the day, the building will be empty from 6 in the evening until 7 or 8 in the morning or something like that. So there's a good 13, 14 hours there where there's nothing going on. So making sure you close doors as you go. So you're looking at having permanent fire escapes, early fire stopping in modular buildings, rather than waiting long. Just, you know, put temporary stuff if you have to. You know, don't sign it off until, let's say, all the services are there. But if you're going up, let's say, multi-story buildings, then you might need to have, you know, temporary fire stopping. Put it in every 10 floors, or it might be every 4 floors or something like that. So you're trying to minimize your losses. Firefighting shaft, lighting conductors, lightning. And so, like, if you're building a distillery, maybe that's the first thing that should go up before you start to test any distilling operations, because you're going to have alcohol in the premises. You're probably going to be installing motors and electrical sensors and things like that, or electrical equipment, air handling units, things like that. Well, make sure your electrical lightning conductors are actually installed first, giving you protection. You know? And so things like wet and dry risers, make sure that you bring them in early, and ensure that there's adequate water supply for the firefighting. So, as I said before about dust suppression, well, maybe get a bladder, maybe get a tank, or just literally hire a tanker trailer. And we can make a fitting that's suitable for the local fire brigade. And that might be just a quick fitting. Usually, if you're building a site, you've got lots of fitters on the site. You can make an adaptation or something like that. But have a discussion with your local fire brigade as to what fittings they would like. All hydrants should be marked clear of obstruction. Appropriate extinguishers, say for electrical distribution panels, just have a carbon dioxide one or a dry powder maybe. We have 24-hour security, do fire checks throughout the night and over holidays and weekends. Bank holidays, great example. Nobody on site. The security person might be there just temporarily, but the instructions should be there so that anybody can read them and understand them. So that's where your pictures come in. But walk through the site with them and get a handover. Sign it over with them. Permanent occupancy, this is part of the UK guide, really. So it's permanent occupancy not permitted without prior approval by the local authority. But then you'd have to have a lot of discussions really with your insurers as to, does the client take it while we're still working on site? So there's probably going to be handovers of insurers, policies and you know what cover is being provided if you've got it. But the code of practice actually looks at not just construction from the ground up, but also looks at renovation. So you've got a building, you may be renovating a room or renovating a building within a finished site. So you're going to have to work around all those things. Construction workers must not live on site in caravans and should be separated with suitable hoarding. We kind of think, surely not. But if you've got a site that you have to be in Dublin or someplace remote that you might need to be bused from your nearest hotel, that might be 20 minutes away. Maybe if you had a camper van, or maybe it all depends on where the sites are. No, if you're on a platform out in the Irish Sea or something like that, or off you're building wind turbines, you know, you might need local accommodation. So maybe portable, you know, mobile homes or camper vans might be tolerated, might be cheaper than actually being in a hotel. And you might have self-employed people actually in their own motorhome, but making sure that that's away from the building that you're building, things like that. Any questions?
No, I'll cover them at the end anyway. That's great.
Just checking to see where you're weak. So we're moving on now to section 10 about temporary covering materials. I see that this is the biggest source of fire problems, because all the walls that you have that you're trying to protect, your furniture, your fittings, your air handling units, your new PC or your new screens, things like that, we'll cover them. We'll protect them when you're working because they all don't want the dust and things like that. But they're usually covered with the cardboard boxes that they came in. Cardboard is very flammable, produces a lot of heat, very hard to even throw water on the outside. It'll actually run off and you can still have the fire on the inside, so you have to apply a lot of water. So really, the whole idea is if it's nothing to burn, it can't burn. You know, now there's going to be problems, of course, with dust and things like that, but there are temporary covering materials that you can put down that are not as combustible. So this particular hotel that I surveyed, you know, they did all the fire doors open. This was to open within, I think it's 4 weeks. So, you know, 95% of the building is done. So your exposure, you're nearly hanging off, and there was no extinguisher on this site because they were ordered for the construction. They were ordered for the finished one, and one contractor was going away with his extinguishers while there was something not yet just scheduling. But the other problem is all the doors are propped up and they're all covered in corrugated, and the corrugated itself is combustible. The floor has got corrugated. That was combustible. Of course, they were doing the skirting board, so you had all sawdust nearly every 2 or 3 feet. You know, so that was combustible. So you know, there's lots of things you could do. Probably start with closing the doors, having a hoover, doing more frequent cleaning, things like that. You know, those would be the things that I'd be looking at as a surveyor. This was a hospital not too far away from here, and they're just the new heaters, radiators, things like that. They can work at a lower temperature now, things like that. So they have more fins, and there's lots of different features. And of course, they can be delicate, but surely do you have to have it in cardboard? So then you're all of a sudden, my concern is, well, was there any smoking on site? Well, how close was your nearest hot one? You know, so like if you still want to keep that, what other things can we do to try and minimize it? So the other problem is that our room next door, this is the blue line there, you know, that was actually, the door frame itself was protected with foam, but the foam itself is combustible. It also stops the door from closing, so that if you had a fire in the room, or you had stock, you're contaminating the hall as well as the room. So you're back again to square one, having to strip everything out. And portable extinguishers can't be said just have enough of them. You know, if you deal with a small fire, but record it like an incident. You know, you'll go to a site, you'll see a pulled pin. So is it an issue that the employees, the workers on the site are having an issue with management? You know, are they disgruntled, or are they likely to start the fire? Are they operating the break, the fire alarms just to take a break? So it's having good relationships and having good feet on the ground will be important for large sites. So I'm a big advocate of MBWA, management by walking about. So get your permits, do your walking, get people and walk, smell and look and have the conversations and see what do you see. So they should be located in a conspicuous position. They're really, not that you want to trip over them, but they should be at every floor. So as you're going into the floor, normally your exit routes, that's where you're going to be at. So in this room, actually, we've got a call point at the door. And they're not located over here on my side, but everybody's going out the last thing. The first thing you do, hit the brake glass and head on. You know, so that's where your extinguishers should be located, close to those points as you're going out of it and things like that. And one of the big things, right on plant. So rollers, dumpers, cranes, tractors, anything, you know, that's they have fuel, their heat, they're hot, their brakes could catch fire, the engine, they could be dusty, they might be serviced in a long while, but they've all got tires and things like that usually. There's a lot of energy and heat generated in around those machines. So it's important to actually have an extinguisher on every plant. The other thing is you won't have to go looking around for a fire or for a fire extinguisher. If you see a machine, there's always a small one. No, I don't remember, summer of 2018, I think it was a very hot, dry summer. We had a couple of weeks there in June, July, where even we allowed smoking outdoors under the regulations. But the problem is the grass was combustible. The grass was connected to the little shrubs. They were dry, that was combustible. And that was right next to your building. Now you might have a tree that you were told to don't chop this down. This is part of kind of the finished article, things like that. That might be drying out. You know, so there's a whole load of combustible materials that you have to look at. So you have to watch fire spread around the site. And then, of course, just look, making sure that they're all mobile plant. And that way, then you could probably control vans that come in on site. So if there's a van on site, if it doesn't have an extinguisher, get it off, move it away, things like that. You know. So, but like the other vans might actually have little workbenches in them. You know, so making sure that that's a workbench right next to the site. So control of that will be important. We go on now to security. This is really all about so that it can help with both theft of items. You know, materials went through the roof there since the pandemic. Not through the roof, it probably went up about 50%. You know, there was an awful lot of projects being scheduled around the delivery of things like rockwool, you know, and scaffolding boards were expensive, you know, and people would steal them, you know. So apart from just timber pallets and things like that, they're hard to get. So dropping them and you know, yeah, we'll drop the materials. Can I have the pallet back, please? But there's other things that you look at, things like that. So the security looks at all kind of the perimeter fencing, making sure that you have somebody aware of what's going on. You don't want to have any losses. So you could have a physical presence at the entrance where employees sign in, sign out. The middle creature here, like a Dalek, is actually a standalone sentry that's got electrical sensors, emergency lights, so that it'll start flashing, and if it'll detect motion sensors and things like that, it will have a live feedback to a monitoring station, and it will tell you, security, I'm watching you, get out of here. You know, so it's actually having an online presence. Now, the other way to look at it is you can have it up in the pole, and that actually operates off of solar panels. So you can actually run these systems without having power yet on the site. They don't need huge amounts of power, so they can operate on battery and things like that. Oh, by the way, these are all GPS tagged in case you kind of put it into your van and take it away or something like that. But they have challenged these in lots of ways, things like that. But there's you know, it's a good start. But making sure, like, if you've got a fixed camera, you know where the camera is pointing, but you also know where the camera is not pointing, and that's an advantage for somebody who has got ulterior motives and things like that. We're moving on. Section 13 looks at temporary offices. We all have temporary offices, and things that are so making sure your fire in your set down plan. Your very first thing about your fire prevention is, where are these going to be located? You're going to need power. You don't want to be changing the location of these regularly as the project. One set down area where we can all work. That's common. So you want it close to the site, but you don't want it too close. So really, there's standards there about how close you can go to how close you should go. But there's always, it's risk management to a certain extent. If you are in under the building and you don't have a footprint, then you might need to assemble an awful lot of materials off-site and handball them in, or crane them in, or something like that. You know, where you're assembling them with nuts and bolts rather than welding them on site. But like the offices themselves, this is now nearly temporary accommodation, so you have to make sure that that has a fire detection system that covers the office above as well as the one that you're in, because the good thing is, don't store anything above it or below it. So the old sites, plenty of space, I'll throw a couple of, insulation or some fuel tanks or cans or something like that in under there to be sheltered. But all you're really doing is creating a lot of combustible materials around it. But from a life safety is what you should be looking at there as well. You don't want the smoke from that fire to be contaminating your site, especially if you're building clean rooms. Where your car, like, so you're going to have an awful lot more pharmaceuticals than a lot of places. So just having the skill set and things like that, and what does the customer want? So ideally 6 meters away, so you should be able to get a tanker or a lorry down behind it and things like that. That'll, and they're metal containers. That helps reduce the external spread of fire. But in a container, if you've got a metal container up on the top, the fire can actually radiate down through the floor. It's like in a ship. You've got a box on each side that can radiate the heat out and up and things like that. So it's important to make sure that the fire detection system covers all the floors. So you're going to have to put that into your temporary offices. Looking at flammable liquids and gases and things like that. It's not rocket science, but it really is. If it looks combustible and it's red or something like that, surveyors these are kind of no-brainers. So just trying to control those. So a good safety officer, the fire coordinator that we had at the start, having the person allocated to it, they should be looking at that. It's not just hot works, what you're doing with your materials. And all you want is just the materials that you're working with. Everything else, get it offsite. Again, what I'm saying about hot works, you have to look at things like electric arc welding. We've got a lovely sign here in the middle, no smoking, no naked flames, things like that. But for somebody who doesn't have English as their first language, is that going to be a challenge? What does a naked light mean to somebody who doesn't have English as their first language? So literally look at pictograms is what I'd be recommending. Explosion of acetylene cylinders. Now there's a whole section about acetylene. So why are we concerned about acetylene? The safe. So if you've got an acetylene fire, the safe distance that you must have is about 200 meters in radius. So draw 200 meters from this room, and we're stopping access to the main road, where you might be evacuating a school, and then all of a sudden, is that going to affect commuting? Is that going to cost you? It might all fall on the construction project if there's an incident. They don't stop these acetylene fires within 5 minutes, unless of course it explodes. But otherwise, they could be throwing water on the acetylene fire for maybe 24 or 36 hours, just to keep it cool, The other trick that we have, I'm not quite sure you can probably see this. This actually is a thermal imaging camera. Modern technology. We got this 3 or 4 years ago as surveyors. We use this out taking photographs of electrical panels. It might help identify if something is hot and say, well, no. A good eye will tell you if something is hot, it'll look like it's burning or it is under pressure. But that's a good way to maybe include in your hot work permit that you don't have to for everybody, but maybe a fire safety check will be able to take photographs and things like that. It'll also look at where there's something is hot as well as cold. So you have cold spots from leaks or roof drainages or something like that. So it's actually a handy tool. But it's a great learning exercise for the people who are managing your fire watch, that you can see the way heat radiates through a pipe or a gasket on the wall or something like that, So it might help a little bit, But it doesn't take a genius to follow where the heat is. If it looks like it's hot, and that's where you need to be looking at bitumen and tar and things like that. Bitumen isn't as combustible as you think. It's the propane that I'd be more worried about. And again, we're on the flammable liquids and things like that. Make sure it's securely fenced, shaded from the sun, bonded, things like that. The obvious things about reducing your heat exposure and things like that. Store no more than a day's supply. Everybody wants to bring in stuff for a week. It means you're going to have to bring only what you need for the day and take the rest of it off site. If you can't, you might need to create a particular area within the site that is clearly identified on your site drawings. But of course, your site changes every week. So guess what? You're going to have to update your site drawings. So there's lots of guidance really about kind of the storage of flammable liquids, making sure that there's adequate signs and include that in your site induction. Again, what I said there about acetylene, it's unstable in a fire. Unstable is explosive, is the word. So the fire brigade should establish a 200-meter exclusion zone. And they actually probably use a thermal imaging camera to see where's the heat. If it's breaking down, they're going to be well behind the 200 meters. And you're looking at a long exposure, things like that. The specific, so there's links there on the handouts. If you get them on soft copy, you'll be able to link there to the fire safety standards there. This is the Irish guidance in relation to acetylene, things like that. And then there's other links there about acetylene and transportation failures and things like that. So literally carrying it, that you carry acetylene cylinders vertically. You don't leave them lying down when you're transporting them. It's a liquid in a mesh and things like that. So, but if it's standing up, you have to leave it. If you have it rolling around in the back of your van or whatever, If you bring it to a site, it should be standing for at least a half an hour before you can start to use it. And of course, look at where you're storing it. Make sure it's acetylene is stored separately from oxygen. You don't bring all your goods to the one basket to make it really interesting. And hot works is a key part of it. Making sure you have a permit, making sure it's only for the day, it's specific for the task. So issuing a hot work permit for a week is ridiculous. That's not going to work. It's only just a paper exercise at that stage. So you're going to have to, it's what are you doing? Why are you using it? How can you control it? And maybe using something like your thermal imaging camera might actually reduce your fire watch afterwards. You know, you might be able to clear the fire watch. You can take a digital photograph of the temperature, and if it's shown to be back to be normal, then you can probably terminate it, you know. So there's a very good separate guidance really on hot works, things like that. But have a look at it. On that next slide. Electricity and gas don't have to be about a third of all fires are caused by electricity. That's where all the power is coming. You know, now this is before we start to go electrified on construction sites, where you've got EV cars. You might get EV plant that might need electrical power and things like that. So these are going to need more attention. What else are we going to be talking about those? So there's lots of regulations there. You need a qualified person, of course, and you should be looking at quarterly inspections. That's every 12, 13 weeks. 12 weeks, sign it off. And you're looking at the obvious. You don't have to be a genius to see if there's somebody, if there's points on the going. And the thermal imaging camera is very good to spot those. You can do tracing things like that. So, but look at where your main power is. Gas. On this particular site, I was kind of, well, gas is still a risk. So this is a multiple choice question, and call the safety officer over. So I'll give you 3 questions. So is it a live gas main that we're looking at? Just in case you didn't recognize the big yellow pipe. Right? The big yellow pipe is interesting. So I asked the question, was it a live gas main? Or was it a no gas main pipe that had been isolated? Or you're unsure, you don't know. And the question, the answer I got, which was probably the worst of them all, was I don't know. At least no. Things like that. But look at the machinery. Is the machinery too big for the job? Maybe a smaller machine. Maybe it should be really hand done. So this is why I'm a big advocate of MBWA. Get out, walk around, have a look. That pipe wasn't feeding just this. It wasn't feeding this side that we were in. That was feeding maybe half Dublin. So these are just know where these are, know what your excavations are. That is surely it's part of fire risk management on the site. You'll make the evening news anyway if that goes off. And looking at your waste is critical. It usually contains cardboard, and we're all into recycling. That's important. So you've got to segregate your waste on good sites. You've got metal, and you've got rubble, and then you've got maybe timber and what are recyclables. But really, just looking at it, you reduce your bins where they're located. Have more frequent collections, so you've less to combust. It reduces your fires, the amount of fire, how big it can get. And earlier on, I mentioned about vegetation. So making sure the vegetation is cleared. And even electric insurance. What could catch fire in this weather? But we do actually have extremes throughout the year. What do I need to say about housekeeping here? But these are projects that are due to open in a couple of weeks. Now the floor was covered in a sheet of timber. So that kind of a light temporary sheet of timber that's probably less combustible, but you start off with getting hoovers, getting somebody paid to clean up, you know. But really, you've got the workers there. They get paid to do this job. Don't leave a mess for another person. So that's really where good supervision just says, stop now and fix it up, rather than rushing to finish the job. Plant vehicles. Now, earlier on, we said all mobile plant, we should have extinguishers on them, things like that. But you have to look at the stationary plant powered by internal combustion engines. So those are kind of on generators or compressors and things like that that you'd have on site. So refuel only in a designated area. Do not fill fuel tanks while the engine is running, because you've got hot exhaust and you'll spill stuff and things like that. So compressors should be housed separately. So you're all about, you don't want people to steal the plant, the generators. Maybe there's winters coming and maybe a temporary portable generator might be very interesting. So there's lots of security things that you can do about a site. You even have, let's say, one of these on the very bottom there, you've got these large vehicles for moving out. How much are they? 150,000. A lot of money. The tires themselves could be what might be the interesting part that you want, and things like that. But really, if one had a fire, you don't need to take the whole lot of them. It's just push them apart at night time. So there's a good 10 meters between them. Look, if you don't have the space, then don't put them all together. You might maybe put 2 together and then have a space and then another 2. There's lots of different ways. Just trying to reduce your risk all the time. Think about it. Unfortunately, if you had a site that had arson, it wouldn't matter where they're located. They'll burn them all. And nobody likes that, but that's why it's important to have good security and remote security. And there's a lot, again, when you look back at the security items that you can actually have, you can set the vehicles in a prominent location under the supervision of a temporary sentry. These are just examples of generators and things like that. One on my right, had a drip tray. It was all good. The other one on my left here, and that was underneath a scaffold, tower scaffold, to get out of an excavation. And all I could get was the fumes as I was going down the basement. In the middle of winter, you get really kind of maybe 6 or 7 in the morning. There's no air movement at all around the middle of the city. So these generators just pumping up exhaust right up on our escape route, in and out, things like that. So it's probably something case of let's actually duct it up, take it out. So there's more than just fire safety in this situation. Materials and storage, having literally, if you can't store it safely, I'm just looking at the time, having a place to store it off-site, or having materials that have LPCB 170 or 1207 standard, LPS standards there. So your corrie board should have those. Having a no smoking policy on site will be critical. And I'll quickly go through some of these, evidently, and I'm serious, these are on sites that you have all the safety signs and the fuels, and somebody beside it is probably not smoking, but there was evidence of smoking beside them. So it's you don't have to be a genius. High-rise construction is probably going to be another challenge. We don't normally have it here in Cork, but this is the plan for the docks here. They're looking at 20 or 30 stories. Anybody know? Lots of stories anyway. Big story there for anybody, apart from having a flood zone area working. But this is what we're planned for Ireland. We're probably going to have to go that way to reduce our footprint, to make it economical for the site and things like that. But we are getting these projects. They're not pie in the sky anymore. So this code of practice will actually help you there. High-rise construction, you're looking at kind of horizontal fire stopping as you're building up, and things like that you put in temporary, that you don't lose the whole lot. So of course, having your escape routes and timely escape, incomplete compartmentation, literally build a temporary wall and make it, it doesn't have to be pretty, but that in itself will help with security going through the site, but it'll also help with fire suppression. You might have all these temporary fire structures, but then somebody needs to go to the loo and they just blow a hole in your fire stopping through a wall. Timber framed houses or apartments or something like that. I think there was a video on this, and this was just pure ashes after the first alarm within 15 minutes. 15 minutes was gone. All you had was the metal frame of the scaffolding afterwards, identifying it. And we looked at the emergency event, the time it took for the fire brigade to get here. It's gone at that stage. So that's why maybe insurers don't particularly like composite or insulated formwork, things like that, made of polystyrene or timber frame, things like that. So let's go back to the very start of the document, which was select stuff that doesn't work or minimizing it. So these are all kind of good practice guidance. And you could have temporary sheeting on the outside. That sheeting itself could catch fire because it's plastic. So there's lots of materials you can actually get which are safer options. Having good housekeeping, or as best as you can, things like that. So this might be just a top floor extension, but where's all the combustible materials? They were up on the roof, all timbers. Do we need to have it all there? Only having a minimum amount. So scheduling is important. But you mightn't be able to dispose of all your timber floors because they're part of the listed structure. So why are you going to store it? Do you need to store it right next to your building, or could you store it at the end of the yard? Take it away from exactly where you need it. Your insulation, is it combustible? So maybe something like Green Guard, which is polystyrene, extruded polystyrene. Just watch where you're locating it. Only use the minimum amount of it, or not use it at all. Is there any substitute that you could use? Surely, like how long did it take you to collect all that waste? Maybe it's time to actually ship it out. Having extinguishers is good, and this particular temporary fire station fire alarm had actually a manual call by bell at the back. Again, the extinguishers are gone, so this is a part of management by walking about. And again, what I'm saying here is ride-on plants should have one. Temporary accommodation. People will actually be living on site in some sites because it might be remote or difficult to get there or cheaper or something like that. So you're going to have to deal with all those challenges. It might be access for plant if there was a fire down the basement. It might even be flooding. These are all a whole lot of challenges that you would have. Access in and out, getting fires and things like that. You might have traffic management and delivery scheduling, because maybe there's schools, there's hospitals close by, or maybe you can't work on a Saturday or before 7 in the morning. And you might need to keep all the trees and shrubbery and things like that. What we would like to see is something clean and tidy. What we don't like to see, if the whole that has to go back and this is to do there, that's where a fire could start. Or if it did start, you would not be able to put it out. And you're not going to send a fireman in there to try and put it out. And everybody, he will ask the question, is everybody out? If you know that there's nobody at the site, they will leave that burn. They're not going to risk their lives. So, look, it could be smart at the front and a totally different challenge at the back. So these are the things. There could be basements, there could be other structures. I'm not saying clean and tidy. If there's nothing to burn, hey, we're not too bad. Useful links. There's 3 good guides here. So there's the European So the CFPA, so that's the Confederation of Fire Protection Associations in Europe. They've produced a whole load of guidance and things like that. Lots of guidance is free of charge, are all free, about 20 of them. One of them actually, Section 21, is all about during construction. The primary one that I've talked about this evening is the Joint Code of Practice on construction sites. If you link onto the document, if you get the PDF version, just click on the link and to open it up for you. There's also the HSE guide there on fire and construction sites. That's me. Any questions?
Perfect. Is there any questions from the floor? Just I can start online maybe, and we can go from there. Or is there someone from the floor that wants to start?
I was going to ask about fire plans on construction sites. 3 months. Is there any mention of that? Checking every 3 months and a review every 3 months.
If the site is changing, it might need more frequent checking. You know, so let's say like if you're building housing or building something that's moving and progressing down the road, literally the risks will be changing. It might be a new road construction, or it could be something else, you know, that you've started here and moving around. So that's all. It depends on what the project is. But as more expensive materials come in, that's a good time to be looking at them. But probably knowing what's combustible as things change. Again, walk about, have a look.
Online there, what form of insurance policy covers fire on a construction site? Contractors all risk.
You need to talk to your insurance broker on that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to plead the fifth of that one.
Yeah.
You know, talk to your insurance broker.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
yeah, that's okay.
How do you deal with the age-old problem of latex gloves covering smoke detectors?
That needs discipline. The person who applied it needs to be probably disciplined and given a red card. You know? But that's really hot works. So are you going to mask the sensor? Now you still might need temporary cover for it. You know, because I see an awful lot of sites that you know how else can you do it? So you might need to mask it. But if it's well documented, I don't mind what way it's done, provided that it's removed after your hot work. And that's where literally check your document, things like that. But if it's there after you've gone, you can be guaranteed that's a no.
And are there any particular type of construction which is no longer insurable? Example, polystyrene formwork.
Not attractive to insurers because it's like, let's go back to the first Joint Code of Practice, section 5, and says select something that doesn't burn, please. And if you had your house lined with firelighters, your new building lined with firelighters, is that what you want? Now, it serves a fantastic purpose for insulation, but the occupiers are not aware of how combustible the material is. Is there other rock wool or other materials? The problem is it costs more. It's got other challenges. You're looking at dampness or something like that, and structure. So there's lots of challenges there. But as I said, if it's not combustible, it's more attractive. I'm not saying that the price is right. Nearly any insurer, but then it does become uneconomical to insure. But that's really talk to your risk surveyor afterwards, maybe as to why we don't like it.
Does the latest revision of the JCoP deal with parking and charging areas for electric cars and the associated fire risks?
It mentions it, things like that, but there's other codes of practice in the FPA, the Fire Protection Association, on charging electric vehicles and things like that, not just construction people, things like that. So really, you're looking at about 10 meters away from your building that you're constructing, things like that. But it might be just, it doesn't all have to be electrical cars. You know, it could be all plant and machinery.
Any thoughts about multiple chargers on site?
Have a dedicated place. The problem is somebody might steal somebody else's battery chargers and power packs and things like that. I presume that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. So the multi-chargers and things like that, it's a huge source of power. And I was surveying a risk that had a battery pack charging in the tool bag. The tool bag caught fire, the battery caught fire, tool bag caught fire. That was on a combustible corrugated, and the fire spread out the door and around the corner. The whole floor then was ruined and had to be stripped back to day one. So have a dedicated area, non-combustible metals and kind of things like that. It helps, but have an electrician look at it.
For your charging point, there is a solar charging point that can be either fed by diesel at night if there's not enough solar, or by hydrogen. Yeah, it's a cube, charges about 60 tools. Yeah, sits outside its own area. It's secure. You have your own lockable code. They're about 30,000 each. Each hectic lockable for their projects.
So there's lots of ideas out there, but what I'd be looking at it, having it, at least you've recognised it as a risk, and locating it in a non-combustible area or non-combustible structures, so concrete and things like that, making sure you've got extinguishers and making sure that you can switch it on, switch it off, and things like that.
The final question online here is, do you have a view on ICF construction?
I do. It's combustible, so it's just trying to, that's the biggest problem. I can see financially and economically, you can build a house in 3 weeks with ICF, and you don't need a fantastic skill set. I could probably do it, give me a day's training and a 2x1, and you'll be able to stack these together, throw in your steel, hold it together, pour in your concrete, and before you know it, you've got floor one done. But it's combustible. So maybe a house, you're trying to minimize your exposure. Is that what you want? You know, but it's combustible. The whole house doesn't need to go up together. Maybe. Look, we haven't got that experience nationally yet, but fire, like there was housing estates in the Midlands caught fire there, 10 years ago or something like that, and the speed at which they burned was surprising. So maybe a house on its own, once it goes bigger and higher, things like that, you just need to be very careful. So yes, I have an opinion on it.
Yes.
Can be avoided.
And the last one I'll take online is this another one come up. What should the hot works permit cover, and how long for fire watch after hot works obtained?
So the hot work, so the fire watch, we're saying an hour, but having a thermal imaging camera might help you as well. That you might need to stay longer. There's a whole code of practice there, literally on hot works and what you constitute as hot works, and clearing the area of combustible materials is a big start and things like that. But there's a specific code on that. That's nearly an overnight talk. Sorry.
Yeah, perfect. And if there's no more from the floor, I'd like to just thank Fabian for a wonderful presentation. It was very knowledgeable. There was a lot of information there that was highlighted that I suppose walking around sites myself that I kind of didn't even take much notice of. You know, it's there, but it's kind of in the background, and you don't take the notice that needs to be done. And a lot of the stuff that you pointed out might seem very simple, but it's everywhere. So it's everywhere. And I must say it was just a great presentation. It was a lot of information that was provided there that is required for engineers to know, and the information is online. As you stated there, we're going to give out the slides, and that anyone that will be able to click on the links, etc.
My email is there if you have any questions, Fabian.murphy@aviva.com.
So thank you very much.